project involves construction of 2 new tunnels for CSX. The first phase was building a new tunnel directly south of the existing tunnel alignment, and then the second phase is demoing the existing tunnel and putting a new tunnel in that alignment, and that allows them to double their efficiency. Before we could do the tunnel demolition, we were going to salvage the portal facade. There was like 115 stones that we salvaged and saved. Everything was cut apart with wire saws and chainsaws, and this was over live traffic. Everything had to be coordinated with the trains coming through. So
how often do they come through?
It can vary from, you know, a half hour to you don't see one for 2 or 3 hours, and you hit 3 or 4 in a row. And then we had to, like I said, pick and move in between these trains. And these picks were about 5,000 pounds a piece. We use these, what you see in the picture, those 2 articulating trucks with steel wings. And what that allows us to do is to work in these quick time frames. Instead of taking a 6-hour time frame, we could come in here and work for a half hour, take down whatever that might have been, a 7-foot ribbon of that tunnel, drop it to that articulating truck and get out of the way. So, you know, you can see with the trains coming through, we had to take precautions with, you know, if the brick was going to fall, or, you know, the vibrations, you don't want anything to happen. So, you know, at times we'd have to take down a 7-foot ribbon, then we send some of our guys up in man lifts, and they would have to hand pick any loose bricks off just to make sure there was no damage to the train coming through. And you can tell we have maybe 6 inches of spacing on the outside of those trucks, so everything was really tight. And what helped us here is we have an excavator that allows us to reach up to 60 feet out. And so this excavator up in the right side of the picture that you would see, he was sitting right here where we were at now, and he could reach almost the other side of the tunnel. So working in tandem with the excavator at grade, we're able to reach and move our way into the tunnel. Some days we'd get 40 feet, some days we'd get 15. It was just, a lot of it was based on our track time.
How many men do y'all average on site each day?
Anywhere from 12 to 15 every day, and that, you know, that included an on-site mechanic. You know, we wanted to make sure if we had a breakdown due to our time constraints that there wasn't any downtime. You know,
right up.
Yep, just pick right up where we left off. Yeah, another aspect of the work, there's a 100-year-old 15 diameter sewer structure that runs, standing on top of it, and it runs up and comes diagonal. Another part of their scope was that they had to do selective demo around the top arch. There was a concrete lining over the top that these guys had to come in and do selective demo on with super small hammers. We had to be very careful with our operations as the tunnel was built in 1870. Throwing another curveball on the job, we're just a block from a residential area with some townhomes. So the project has a noise and vibration restriction, pretty strict restriction. We can't exceed certain decibel levels at certain monitors that we have stationed across. So unfortunately for us, fortunately for the neighbors, there's a noise monitor right next to their townhomes. So we had to, when these guys were coming in with their demo machinery, we had to come up with a way that we would basically mitigate the noise and vibration that would go over to those townhomes. So we created almost a noise blanket barrier that was about 20 feet high that we put at the end of this block just to block all the noise and vibration that would travel over to those townhomes. And we also did the same thing under this bridge to make sure it didn't travel that way.
Yeah, I can see the logistics challenge here. It's an understatement.
What our scope of work was. So basically it's broken up into 2 things. One is the historic building supports that we needed, and then also the main sheeting and shoring. We had a lot of obstacles we had to go around, be it utilities, buildings, between buildings, installation of bracings. We had wales and corner braces in the corner, and then we had tiebacks too. Then we had the installation of underpinning pits. They were roughly 40 to 50 feet underneath this building and also the Civil War building. So that was very sensitive that we actually put 14 pits underneath that, underpinning pits. And then it was roughly 40 to 50 feet down. and we hit groundwater about 20 feet down. So these guys were working in water coming in on the sides of them. So the historic building support. Our scope was there's 3 buildings that we actually put on stilts. 2 actually moved over, so it was somewhat easier. You could drill the plunge piles, they call them, in, and then pour the concrete and then move the buildings on top of that. But the Midas building, HB1, stays in that, never moved. It was in that position. So we actually had to not only put piles around it, but come in with mini piles inside the building. And then we had to also support the columns that were there because they had to put a new slab in too, a 3-foot slab, and the other one was higher. So the columns that were holding, mid-span columns that was holding the buildings had to be, well, not removed, but couldn't be used anymore because the foundation would be gone. So we had to actually put in columns to support the mid-span. We stood up these beams with a forklift and then shimmed it up to the wood joist to hold the joist, and then laced it across to pick up the columns. So basically, imagine you're a foot higher and you're trying to feather these beams in. It was kind of tight.
And you all saw the pictures of the facades over there. That's what they look like in real life. Hanging out over the excavation, we dug down, again, 40 feet underneath those things with confidence that they were going to stay where they're supposed to be and not move too much. We didn't talk too much about the monitoring system, but between Davis and Clark Foundations, we've been obviously monitoring all these historic buildings. And at one point, actually, this HBO1 building here started to move more than we were anticipating because of our tiered excavation. And we kind of had to come up with a plan with KCE, our structural engineer, and Clark Foundations and Strip Matter to figure out how we were going to dig this thing down and still get all the steel that they needed to installed. So that was a real coordination effort to keep the building from moving into our hole. This is what the the little piles on the foundations look like. So it's essentially underpinning, but with piles. So you can see we've
those driven piles.
No, we hand dug pits,
and then
poured a footing, and then put the posts in. Yeah, and that's once the roof and all that stuff. Because this is in such bad shape, so they're going to replace the roof and then each floor. Once it's all replaced, then we go inside and do the same thing, so they can lower it.
You know, there's no compromising when it comes to safety and also to historic buildings, so you just have to get it done.